Well, good morning. Hey, I feel like I have this spotlight on me. I need to do a little dance or something. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on this cold Saturday morning. Thank you guys for being here. If we haven't met, my name is Adrian, and I get to work on the small groups team. It looks like everybody has seen the table labels, but make sure you're sitting at the table that you should be at. Today, Dave and I actually are just talking about how grateful we are for all of you, whether you're leading this semester or you've led in the past. We're super grateful. We know the easy answer when thinking about leading a group is to say no. That would be way easier. But we truly believe that God blesses your yes. And so thank you guys for leading. Thank you for your heart to lead. We know it's a big commitment, but we appreciate it. And you guys make up so much of what Lighthouse needs to make a big church feel small. So thank you guys. Today we're gonna be talking about building community. You guys are already at your tables. Make sure you sign in on that sheet that's on your table. We're gonna have some sessions where Dave's over there. He is going to be talking about building community, just give us some insight on that, but we'll also have time for discussion within your tables. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. Let me pray, and then we'll kick it off. Dear God, thank you so much for this new day that you've given us, Lord. I just thank you so much for every single person that is here. I thank you for their hearts. I thank you for just their leadership and just their yes, for them stepping up to lead. I know many of us don't feel equipped. Many of us don't feel like maybe we're qualified, Lord, but that's who you call. And you equip us and you train us. And so, Lord, I pray that we'll just learn something new today that'll encourage us, challenge us, and just help us grow closer to you. So bless this time together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so Dave will come on in.
How we doing? Everybody good? I feel like every morning starts off better with a little Chick-fil-A. So, yes, you're welcome. I know my day started off better once I took a bite of that sandwich. It was just right there. So thank you guys. As Adrian said, I just want to echo that thank you guys for coming. Some of you are leading this semester. Some of you are not. You've led in past semesters, and for whatever reason, they're all very good reasons usually. Some of them I read, and they're not very good reasons that you did not lead this semester. It was a little lame, a little disappointed. I'm just kidding, no. But you guys have led in the past. You know you're gonna lead again in the future. We wanna continue to pour into you. It's not you're only a leader if you're leading in a current semester. You're always a leader. And that's a little bit about what I want to talk about this morning, is this idea of continually being able to build community. Whether you're actively leading a group session or not, there's still work to be done that we can all participate in. And so I'm so grateful that you're here. It's been my prayer, Adrian and I have talked about it and prayed about it, that this would be really fruitful and beneficial for you, again, whether you're leading or not. And so many of you, especially if you're new, how many people this is their first time leading a group here at Lighthouse? Okay, there you go, yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for that. You would have heard in kind of the group leader interest meeting us talk about this idea of community, that community isn't simply found, community is built. Nobody stumbles into community. Anything that's healthy for us, nobody just trips and falls right into it, right? Like whether it's physical health, mental health, spiritual health, you don't just stumble into, oh, this is a good thing. Maybe you initially stumble into that looks like that would be a good thing, but if you actually want to take hold of it and make it your own, it takes effort, it takes intentionality. So there's a lot of people out there, a lot of people come into church. I've been one of these people, I'm not throwing shade. You come in and you go, hey, I want to find community here. And that's a good aspiration. We have a lot of people that come through these doors that they're looking to find community. They love what's going on Sundays. They love the worship. They love the word, all that stuff. But they really want to be able to find community. And we want to help be able to provide opportunities for them to be able to discover where community can be seen But to really have community requires you to build it. It has to be built step by step. And sometimes it's a messy, long process. There's no snap, there you go, first week of group. Your semester is not going to launch on your first week, and suddenly you have community. Now, there's some of you that have been leading for years, and you've put in the work, and you've got that group of people that has community. Even in the midst of that, there's deeper layers to go. Even in the midst of that, there's more work to be done. And I don't mean that as an encouragement. I mean that as you've tasted and seen, and there's more to be had. And so what I just want to talk about a little bit, I want to try to give us a kind of step back, give us a broad view of what community really is, and then look at a few steps along the way of how we can be continually building it. So I'm going to talk for a little bit more than what I just did. I'm just going to keep talking. And then give you guys an opportunity to talk about it at your tables. You've kind of been broken up into specific kind of group types: women's only group, men only group, young adult group. Open to all groups is a little more broad, but that way you can share insights you've seen kind of from within your own area of ministry. Make sense? Everybody on the same page? Awesome. So the kind of textbook definition of community is a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. Another version of that definition would be a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. I think those are both pretty fair definitions of community, generally speaking. But there are several different types of community. There's levels of community. And so up on the screen, I'm going to put kind of this little chart. Well, I'm not going to put it. Dan's going to put it. But I put it in there for him to put there. So really, it's all me. No, I'm just kidding. It's Dan. So there's kind of different layers or levels of community. There's the world community. That's really, really broad, but we hear people talk about the world community. There are shared interests and goals and desires that the world community all has. But that's a really, really broad kind of vision. There's country communities. There's the community of the USA, right? Like there's a community to be had there. There's shared interests. There's shared goals. There's common characteristics. There's racial communities, religious communities. There's communities in regions, like there's the southern community, and then there's like the northeast community. Two very different types of communities, but they share characteristics. They share things about them. You can get into state communities, differences in how states are run, or different thought processes therein, cities, towns, neighborhoods. Like each of these gets a little narrower and narrower, a little more specific and more specific. You get into kind of a neighborhood level. You can know most of the people in your neighborhood, or at least on your street or cul-de-sac or whatever it is. That can become a community in and of itself, where you're sharing things, you're getting to know one another. There's things that are going on in that regard. And then I think we can kind of get to the small group members kind of layer of community, which is a little narrower. It's a little more specific. The goals are a little different. Things are a little more shared. And then we can get into family, friends, that kind of layer where it's really, really concentrated. The further down you get in that funnel, the messier it gets. The further down in that funnel you get, the more rewarding it gets. And so we want to keep pressing further and further and further down. And we don't want our groups to just feel like it's just a neighborhood group, or it's just a group, we share this much bigger idea. We want to get into real specific things. We want to build specific communities that are sharing the same interests, attitudes, and goals. But the further down you get, like I said, it gets messier and messier, but it gets more and more rewarding at the same time. It's the whole risk and reward idea. The riskier it is, the more rewarding it can be. You pull all the risk out of it, the return on investment isn't as big. And so I want to talk a little bit more specifically about that, what that looks like. But the messier it gets, the more rewarding it gets, the more intentionality it requires of you as a leader. You don't get from we could take this same kind of picture and look at it specifically within Lighthouse Church and say the big broad community is Lighthouse Church in general, anybody that shows up to a service online or in person. And then you can get a little more narrowed down to, okay, those that are involved in specific areas that Lighthouse reaches, whether that's Pasadena or Glen Burnie or Catonsville or wherever it is, those specific communities. Then you can get down into teams that are serving together. You can get into ministry areas like men's or women's or CR or whatever it might be. But the further and further down, eventually you're going to get to groups, which is going to be the most messy, but the most rewarding. And so we want to keep pushing. We want to keep inviting people down further and further into that funnel. And so kind of looking at, I think there's a different definition we can offer for Christian community that might help us understand a little bit more what we're pushing for. And so I think a Christian community is a group of people living to be with Jesus together, become like Jesus together, and do what Jesus does together for the good of each other. But I think Christian community is a group of people, any group of people, getting together to live together, to be with Jesus together, that they're seeking to engage in a relationship with Jesus with the support of one another, that they're seeking to become like Jesus together, that they understand that iron sharpens iron, that we only become more and more like Jesus. That's not a solo sport. There is a personal component to that, but you can't do that fully on your own. You need other people to shape you. You need other people to be able to speak into you and help guide you. And there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors and all that sort of thing. And do what Jesus does together, that to be on mission together, to reach the lost and make disciples together for the good of each other. For the good of each other. And we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about that in a few minutes. Where we get some of this idea is the ever familiar groups verse. I don't know if there's a single groups ministry on the planet that doesn't use Acts 2 as one of their base verses for why we do what we do. But I just want to read it. I want to read it, and you've probably heard it 100 times. But I want you to picture yourself in it. As I'm reading, I want you to picture yourself in this situation, what that looks like today, okay? So just let the sound of my voice lull you into a vision of community. Starting in verse 42, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. They were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. My hope is that as we were to meditate on this verse and start to try to cultivate that thought, what does that look like, not just in first century Israel, what does that look like for us today where we live, in the seasons that we're in the areas that we're in, with the people that we're with? What does this look like? I think that there's kind of three ideas that this verse stirs up that I think we can apply where we sit today. I think what biblical community in Acts 2 looks like is three things, and they're all centered around this idea of common unity. An idea that community is common unity. The first one is that it's common unity around Jesus. That our groups aren't just about like you can have fun in your group, but the thing that brings us all together, the thing that is our shared interest, hope, purpose, life, all of that is Jesus. That this isn't just like the Lions Club or Kiwanis, or like this is centered around having unity around Jesus. It's not building an audience around myself as a leader. It's not any of that. It's how can I get people unified around Jesus? I think that's what this Acts 2 is saying. They're all devoted to teaching, prayer, getting into the temple, breaking bread with one another. That's all centered around Jesus. It's being with Jesus together, it's becoming like Jesus together, and it's doing what Jesus does together. It's a common unity around Jesus. That's this, I'll unpack that part in a second. I'll confuse you if I try to do that now. The second thing I think is it's common unity with one another. The center is Jesus, but pulling to the center is all of us having unity with one another. That you're looking at this idea, and it just blows my mind every time I kind of read it and think about it. Like people being willing to, they all believed, they were together, they had all things in common, selling possessions, selling their own stuff to take care of other people's needs. Like that idea is people being unified together. It's saying, I want to put you first. I'm going to put you above myself. I'm going to pursue that. I'm not going to just look to my own needs. I'm going to do what I can to help you. This is unity with one another. And I want to talk more specifically about this later, but unity with one another does not just mean, well, if there's ever any conflict, brush it under the rug because we want unity. Unity for the sake of unity isn't healthy. Unity for the sake of Jesus is healthy. Unity around Jesus is going to often call us to love one another enough to confront one another. It's going to call us to love one another enough to say, hey, I want better for you. I see more for you. I want to engage you, not just call you out and in rudeness, but to invite you back into relationship with Jesus. And so unity with one another, again, we'll talk more about that in a bit. So I think it's common unity around Jesus. I think it's common unity with one another. And I think it's common unity for others. That these people, as they're centering their lives around Jesus, they're caring for one another, they're also being very missional. As they're going, they're following that great commandment of, hey, as you go, teach. As you go, reach the lost, make disciples. That there was unity, that there was more of a purpose than just, I want to build a holy huddle. The purpose was not just how many people can I get in my living room that we can all feel like real good about being around. That's great, but there's always a greater mission. There's always a greater vision for a future that says we're going to keep pressing out into the community, reach more lost, make more disciples. And we see this as they're doing these things, they're praising God, they're having favor with all the people. That you can't have favor with people that you're not interacting with. Can't have favor with people that don't even know who you are. They're interacting, mingling in and among the world around them and gaining favor with them because they're for them. And as they're doing that, the Lord's adding to their number day by day those that are being saved. I mean, the church went from 120 to like 3,000 like that. And then day by day after that, multitudes are being added because there's a common unity around Jesus. There's a common unity with one another, and there's a common unity for others. I think a way to look at this is that there's really three kind of components to a small group. There's the up component. That's you as a leader, that's your group members, their relationship with Jesus, that's spiritual formation, that's that discipleship type component of let's make sure the connection with Jesus is good. There's an in component, that's the relationships within the group. That's how do we continue to connect to one another, get to know one another, share with one another, help one another, love one another. And then there's the out component. That's how do we continue to make an impact on the greater community around us. We're a community that can make an impact on our neighborhood. We're a community that can make an impact on our workplace. We're a community that can make an impact in our city. Like, there are so many different ways to do that, but up, in, and out. And here's the thing when it comes to leading a group, I've really discovered this over the past year and a half, I'd say, is that there are different types of leaders based on those three components. There are up leaders, There's people that are very focused on spiritual formation, discipleship, information, that sort of process of doing a group, and that's how they run a group. I'm one of those people. That tends to be my bent. I'm bent towards, if I'm hosting a group, it's going to be about, we're going to learn some stuff, we're going to read scripture, we're going to try to dive in a little deeper, we're going to do some things, we're going to ask hard questions about biblical topics. But where I really lack on the in component. Like that's not a strong suit of mine, to be able to really foster relationships and make deeper connections with people. I have to rely on somebody else for that. Usually my wife. My wife is the one who does the in work usually. But to be able to know yourself enough to go, this is the type of leader I am. Oh, I'm an out kind of leader. And you can have multiple. It's not to say you're pigeonholed into only one. There's some people that can do two of them. It's rare to find somebody who can do well all three. My point in saying this is know yourself well enough to know this is my bent, and know yourself well enough to go, I need help in these other areas. The community, as a leader, you are not going to build community on your own. Like you think about it for a second, you can't have like common unity with yourself. Like, I guess you could, but that gets weird quick. And so you want to think about, okay, who helps me do this well? How can we do this well together? And you start inviting people in that have different strengths. You start delegating responsibilities, working together, letting other people do what they do well so you can do what you do well, and you're not getting stressed out trying to do everything and be everything to all people. Okay, so just be thinking through that. What does that look like? How can you assess yourself to go, which type am I? I don't think it's that hard. I think there's usually pretty good bents. Like it's usually pretty clear. But if you're having questions or if you're having doubts about that, I'd love to talk to you about it. I think we could figure it out. Any questions about that before I move on? No? Okay. I either sufficiently confused you or I articulated it well. We'll find out later. Okay, so I want to give a couple questions for you to think about, and then we're going to go into a time of discussion about this. We'll put a couple questions up on the screen, and at your table you can kind of talk about some of those things. So when it comes to community, I propose that Christian community is a group of people living to be with Jesus together, become like Jesus together, and do what Jesus does together for the good of each other. Okay, and that last part is important because you can do those other three things together and still make it about you getting from other people. You can still make it about like, oh, I'm going to get in this group so that other people can help me. But where we want to get community to is where you're in the group because you have something to contribute to the group and other people need you to be there as well. And so they need you, you need them. It's this symbiotic relationship where everybody needs each other. And so a couple questions to think about. How specifically are you going to begin to build community? How specifically are you going to do that? I just want to give two quick thoughts for you on this one. I think one of the first things is to point to Jesus in everything. The tension in groups that I've seen over the 20 years that I've been involved in some form of group ministry is always this tension between, are we focusing on teaching people or are we focusing on being nice to people? And it feels like we try to swing the pendulum and like we have to decide between one or the other. And there's a way to stop that pendulum in the middle. Swing a little bit more manageable. But no matter where, even if you're swinging that thing all the way over to it's just about relationships, we always have to point everything to Jesus because Jesus is that common unity that we're all building around. And then the second thing I think in terms of building it is model authenticity. You have to be, like, if you really want to begin to develop some of these things in your group, you have to be willing to be authentic yourself. And authenticity, that's kind of I feel like that word gets thrown around a lot. You could boil it down to another word in some senses of vulnerability. You got to be a little willing to be vulnerable. Now, I do not mean, hear me very clearly, I do not mean air all of your dirty laundry in front of everybody every week. I don't mean just go like, oh, I'm authentic, and start cussing everybody out. Like, that's not what I mean. And if that was your first thought, we should talk. No, what I mean by vulnerability is just being willing to show that you're not perfect. Just being willing to be like, not pretend like you're the one who has it all together. You have all the answers. You feel that pressure. Somebody comes to you with a biblical question that you don't know the answer to, but you feel like you got to fake it. That's not authentic. It is 100% okay to say, I don't know the answer to that. I'd love to find out together with you, though. That's authentic. That's willing to be a little vulnerable. To be able to go, hey, look, I struggle in this area. Would you guys pray for me? Instead of feeling like you've got to be the one to pray for everybody else. That's a step towards authenticity and vulnerability. Okay? And there's a whole spectrum there that you can get into. As your group gets deeper into that funnel, the vulnerability changes. You're able to share a little bit more with people. There's a trust that gets built over time. Don't come out week one and be like, this is everything I've ever done. Probably not going to go well. May not have many people come back week two. But you want to begin to model for people that it's okay. It's a safe place to begin to start showing this is what's really going on inside, and this is the help I really need, and not feeling like they have to come in and put on a front. The second thing I want you to start thinking about, and I talked briefly about this, is who are you going to build this with? Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, ask for help. Invite people in to help where you're not strong. Again, that's a little bit of vulnerability and authenticity too, to just be able to go, that's not me. Like, I'm not wired that way. Like, I've had to admit that to myself in leading groups in the past few years of going, I keep trying so hard to like make myself this super relational guy who can like that's just not me. That's not who I am. That's not how I'm wired. So I have to ask people, look, I can do this part. I can build the system. I can run the group. I need you to help me make sure people like know that I care about them. I need you to help make sure that people know that they're loved and that they can be like, I need help in that area. It's where I'm weak. And so I need to ask for help. So who are you going to build it with? Start thinking through. You probably already have a co-leader. They're probably a co-leader because you maybe naturally already assess this a little bit. But then even as you start getting into your group and you start seeing people's other strengths, invite them into it as well. Find the people that'll help you build community well. And then the third thing is, who are you going to build it for? Who are you building community for? And this one, I mean, I think it's pretty rare to have a really super narcissistic leader that's only building community for themselves. I hope that's rare. I hope that's not happening a ton. But it's not outside the realm of possibility. And if you find yourself in that position, that's certainly correctable. But who are you building it for? Because sometimes I feel like in church especially, we feel like we've got to build this thing for everyone. Like this service or this ministry or this group has to be accessible for everyone. And that's not necessarily the case. There are times and seasons for that, but specific asks get specific answers. And sometimes you're building community for a very specific reason to meet a very specific need. And sometimes it's okay to say, no, this is what the need is. These are the people that need this. That's who I'm going to invite into it. And it's okay if it doesn't fit for everyone. And so thinking about who are you really building this for? Who are you really trying to reach? Who are you really trying to help? Who really needs to be there? And being okay with not being all things to all people all the time. And so thinking about who are you really building it for, and then specifically inviting them into it. Here's one of my, I was going to say pet peeve. It's not really a pet peeve. It's like a frustration maybe, is that there tends to be an approach in groups where we make it all about, specifically when it comes to signups, we make it all about that group page. Like, oh, if I can just make that group page, get that out there, then people will find me and they'll sign up for my group. And then you get like 2 weeks in and nobody's coming and you're frustrated. And what I'm suggesting to you is that there's a better way to fill your group. That the group page is a tool in your tool belt. The best tool in your tool belt is your mouth. It's your personal invitation to people that you're trying to build community for. It's you being willing to be able to step up and be a little bold, to get out there on a Sunday, find the new faces, be an anchor point around here, be a champion for groups, step out a little bit and invite people in. When it comes to building community, and I'll mention this a couple times, there is no room for passivity. If you want to build community, you cannot sit back and wait for it to build around you. You got to stand up, sword in one hand, trowel in the other, and start building the wall. Start building what needs to be built. And so, with that said, we're going to put a couple, it's like he knew. It's like we talked about this. So what I'd like to do is just for a few minutes at your table, talk about these questions, and then in a little bit, I'll come back up and we'll do session 2. Cool? Thanks, guys. Have fun at your tables.